Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Will Anderson. Will is a CEO at Resolver, which is an integrated risk management software for middle to large sized organizations. The solutions include risk management, corporate security, business resilience, and IT risk. Over 1,000 organizations worldwide depend on Resolver security, risk, and compliance software. That's about 1 million people using Resolver each day. Will, thank you for coming to our interview today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Will, could you tell us a short story about yourself and what you guys at Resolver are up to these days?
Absolutely. So our vision as a company is to empower business to move faster. One of the things that we care deeply about is bringing up the relevance of risk management within corporations. Sometimes has been positioned more as protection or a barrier, and we don't see it that way. We believe that risk management adds a lot of value and that we need to have a seat at the table to have those discussions. But if we're going to do that, we have to be speaking in the language of business. And so we have to be talking about how we can have that business achieve their mission. So we have to align to that. So our role in that is to transform risk management to risk intelligence. We want to make sure that we get away from the sort of nuts and bolts of it to really bringing more insight to the executive table to help them make better decisions.
Okay, so could you tell us how Resolver differs from other software providers operating in this space? And what are some examples of your customers' use cases?
Yeah, so I think the thing that we pride ourselves on is user experience. As mentioned, our goal is to get insight to the executive, but that requires us to get it from the first line. And the first line are busy, they have day jobs. And historically, what was happening was that any sort of assessment, whether that be a risk assessment or a control assessment or asking someone questions about compliance, it's going onto their desk and it's being sent in Excel forms or sort of large enterprise software that's hard to use. And so our vision from the beginning was that if we want to provide insight, we have to get good quality data. And to get good quality data, we have to be able to engage that front line with something that looks more like a consumer app. You don't train somebody to buy something on Amazon. You don't want to have to train people to enter their assessments. So the way we did it is when we built our software was instead of hard coding everything, we've used what's called no code platform. That allows us to tailor the platform to the exact needs of that customer. Prior generations of like our competitors that are maybe up market from us would have done that with code. The problem with that is that it is expensive and it's brittle. So when you want to change it, you have to call them and they go and send it to some developers and they change it. In our application is changed via configuration. So once we come in with our services team, we'll deploy something. We then train the administrators and they will then be able to change it however they want because this is an agile industry. And so you got to be able to change on the fly. In terms of use case, we do a lot of financial compliance. We do a lot of ERM, ORM. We've done some business continuity. We also would probably be one of the rare ones that are very strong on both risk, but also on sort of complaints, incident management. In fact, we do some AI in terms of picking out entities out of incident submissions or risk events. And so that's probably our greatest claim to fame in Europe is that we do both of those things, which is fairly rare.
Oh, interesting. So no code in risk management. I never heard about it, but wow, it's a kind of a special category, or you are creating category inside risk management, or there are some other software companies?
I think we're one of the first. I would say that we're flattered to see that when people do startups in this space, they typically follow along. That tells us that we're on the right track. There's certainly people in sort of IT risk or ITSM that have taken this approach. And I think it's necessary because risk is really different depending on how your business is structured. And so we've seen people come from an audit background that are used to sort of a hierarchy. And risk doesn't work that way. You've got to be able to connect a risk to the things that you care about, whether that be a process or an objective or a decision or a project. And that's really hard to think about up front, all the possible permutations. And so I think people, now that no code has been made popular, it's an obvious way, it's an obvious tool to use for this problem because the risk is not really the same in any two implementations. So I think we're probably the biggest that's doing it this way, but there's definitely some coming up behind us doing it very similarly.
Okay. So the trend? What are the major trends are you seeing in the risk management discipline since the beginning of pandemic, and how actually pandemic impacted your organization?
Yeah, so the trends have been sort of I think it's like anything else, it's been an acceleration of existing trends. We thought it was going to hit us, and again, our sales were slower in Q2 last year, but our customers were using us more than ever, and then we rebounded pretty hard and had record quarters thereafter. Because again, I would have thought that with budgets down, it would be hard to get risk management software bought. But I think that when something big like this happens, a lot of people say, how do we prevent it from happening next time? And this is clearly the category that happens. And so we've done very well since then. In terms of customers, the things that we've seen in the field, obviously trying to get away from the biggest thing is we can't do our sessions in person. And so it has really pushed people out of this mindset of having to sit next to people to do the assessments. Certainly in Europe, Europe is much more mature than North America on the concept of a continuous assessment, and we as we things change, we do it. This idea of having to do it without being in person and looking over someone's shoulders, we've certainly seen that accelerated. There is more interest in business continuity, although I don't know how permanent that's going to be. I'm seeing it's kind of slow down a bit on that front. I think those are the big things that COVID drove. I mean, certainly Europe is driving a lot in terms of incident management has become much more important. There's requirements in Canada and in EU to take that much more seriously. And so that's probably the bigger driver we've seen in the last sort of 3 to 6 months.
Mm. So, what role does technology play in risk management? What investment risk management should be thinking about this time? Because there are a lot of new technologies, as you said, self artificial intelligence, machine learning, and we hear all our interviews. People talk about this. Are you seeing this really going to be implemented? And what is your thought about this concept?
Yeah, no, I think it is being implemented. I think that there's a role for risk to oversee it generally within the business because it does create more risk. In terms of it being deployed in GRC, we have deployed it more on the incident side because we get in, narrative complaint, and what ends up happening is that that's a block of text and you can search it, but sometimes you want to connect data points together. So the AI we have deployed will go through a block of text and identify people, organizations, dates, times, places, that sort of thing, and turn it into usable tags, so that if you have an organization show up multiple times in a compliance violation, that'll be picked up. If it's just a narrative, it's not. So that's what we've done, and we're doing a little more work to try to ease that process. We've seen a little bit around kind of control similarity. That's stuff that we are looking at. We're looking at sort of risk comparison type work. But I mean, we watch the market pretty closely. I haven't seen a ton of AI popping up in our competitor systems, specifically around risk and control. We are partnered with a company called Ascent
Hmm.
Compliance, who actually
Yeah.
use AI to pull down regulatory requirements, and that's a phenomenal product. I can't recommend it enough. I
Oh.
think that's probably the most sophisticated I've seen them and Compliance AI doing it. In terms of like the in-house GRCs, I haven't seen a lot, but we have a few ideas and we're working on them. So I can't really talk too much about them until we come out with them. So, watch this space. But I haven't seen that one beyond that use case.
Mm. Yeah, Ascent Compliance is our partner as well. Yeah, interesting. We just spoke a few months ago. We spoke with the guys. We had the two interviews with the guys there. Very exciting software. Yeah. And
Yeah, they're
so,
doing great.
tell me, how is your team structured? How do you manage your IT structure? Are they all outsourced, partially in Canada, or just curious, what you recommend for startups planning to create a SaaS tool with regards to finding and managing IT teams?
Well, hopefully they're not doing it to compete with us. We got enough already. um, I think we have we're a global operation. We have offices all over the place. Our team started out in Canada, and I think if you're starting out, it's important to have your developers sitting right next to you, so that the people that talk to customers every day are sitting right next to and working on a whiteboard with the developers. It's really critical when you're dealing with architecture. Over time, I mean, we do a lot of our testing. We have a great office in Hyderabad. They have been the backbone of our automation testing, and now we're starting to build out a really capable development team there. So I think when you're starting, that doesn't make a ton of sense. When you get to our scale, it starts to
Yeah.
work out really well. So that's kind of where we do it. We don't outsource anything. There's occasionally we partner with people. Again, Ascent being an example, but we want to keep our development really tight and close to us, and we want them to be our team. Certainly now that COVID's taught us all that we can work remote, that drives us to maybe have people elsewhere. They don't all have to be sitting in our offices in Toronto and Edmonton, where we have a lot of developers, or Hyderabad. Now I think anywhere that we work is going to be fine, but if you're starting out, I'd have them sitting in my hip pocket.
Mhm. A few episodes back, we spoke with Tim Leach about, and he was very passionate about his view on objective-centric risk management. Do you share the same view, or your system also combines other principles?
Yeah, so I personally share the same view, but it also depends on what you're trying to do. From an enterprise risk management point of view, I would say that is standard. Norman Marks is the same way. Sergey, like all the people that speak to this, follow that process, and I think that's absolutely true. There's no sense in assessing a risk against something that doesn't matter, and what matters is ultimately the objectives of the corporation. And if you want to be relevant at the executive level, you have to talk in the language that they're used to talking in. Now, that's not all risk management. To me, that's enterprise risk management. There certainly is still a place. If you're working on projects, you're going to assess them against projects. If you're working in IT, you're going to work them against applications. That's more operational risk and more looking at controls. So it depends on what you mean by risk management. I sometimes hear risk management used synonymously with ERM, or enterprise risk management, and I do think there's a bit of a difference there. So there are places to use it. But the one thing I would say that Steve, Norman, sorry, they all get right is don't do it just to do it. You better be using it to make some sort of a decision or to work in some sort of operation. It's not just assess risk to assess risk. That's like a box checking exercise, and that's not going to be valuable. So if it's a project and it's helping you do that project better, then great. That's a good use of it. At the ERM level, if you're not tying it to an objective, I don't know why you're doing it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Will, I would like to ask you a personal point of view. Um, what is the commonly held belief as it relates to risk management that you are strongly or even passionately disagree with?
I think it's that one. I think that there's, I guess it's irrelevant against best practice, but it's hard to say that it's one of these strange things. If you speak to the experts, I think we all say the same thing of you do need to tie to objective. I think that there's some place where we go a little too far. So, if I'm going to say something unpopular with your practitioner, it's that, doing like a quarterly assessment and doing a risk registry and a heat map isn't enough. But I think at the sort of the expert level, that's not controversial. I think one place, this idea of modeling everything, I think that goes too far, and maybe I would differ from some people in that. I think there's a place for it, but the idea of putting that into a GRC system doesn't make a lot of sense to me. To me, it's like doing your budget in your ERP. I think you need the flexibility of a purpose-built modeling solution. And I think if you get really tied down that everything must be quantified and everything must be modeled, you're going to miss some nuance that you can't model. Now, I think quantification is very important. I think sometimes using high, medium, low becomes meaningless, and people are like, I don't want to quantify because I don't know. I think that I don't know is a really valuable conversation of, is that a $10 million problem or a $100 million problem? I don't think it matters if it's 97 or 100, but it does matter if it's 10 or 100. So I'm not saying don't quantify, but I'm saying there's a lot of things in this world that you can't model. And if you focus only on modeling, you're going to miss some qualitative things that I think are important.
Okay, fantastic. And so, looking broadly in your industry, what are the major trends in your space that you expect will take place in coming few years? And what should we expect from you guys in the future?
Yeah, I think it depends on the GRC is interesting in that that it's different continent by continent. If you look at North America, we have to catch up to Europe and Australia and New Zealand. Every customer that we sell in Europe is doing continuous assessment. They're looking at it all the time and highly quantified. We have some very sophisticated customers that are there, but I would say that the bulk of people we talk to for the first time are not there. But it's definitely becoming very important and it's driving forward. So I think that is certainly a trend we're seeing. We're seeing a trend to more integration. Doing these things in silos doesn't make sense. You know, if you have an audit, like why not audit based on your risk scores? Like, don't audit a control that you've already said is not functioning. Just fix it. Like, you should be auditing the controls you say are strong for areas that you say are high risk. And so I think we're seeing a lot of integration on the European side. And then obviously the cyber stuff I think is a little bit overblown, and people are, I'm on a board and the board wants to talk about of a public company and they want to talk about cyber risks, and it's important. Like a tech company like us, like it's obviously our most important risk because it can put our lights out. So we take it very seriously. But in other organizations, it's one of many risks. And so I think that the board should make sure that they're thinking holistically, because in many industries, it's regulatory risk or safety risk. There's other things that I think are as important. I think it's just new and a little bit frightening. And so it's not that. It's actually very well controlled. I think there's great standards for it. So I guess that's the trend I'm seeing. And maybe that's my controversial statement, is we're maybe a little over focused on that. And we're going to lose sight of something that's equally big, that doesn't have the attention today. So I guess I'll answer both those questions in one there.
Yeah, interesting. So, if summarizing, if someone who is listening to this interview would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
So the first one is, again, consumerization, and be focused on your first line. If you are not getting good data, there's no sense in focusing on reporting and all the other stuff. If your data is no good, or you're getting it a month behind, you're in trouble. COVID's a great example. Like, who had COVID on their, pandemic on their, January 2020 risk plan? And if you were doing it quarterly, you'd come back in April and the world's upside down. So, it's an extreme example, but those kind of high velocity risks happen all the time. So I think that's the first thing. Very focus on the front line, get integrated with them, and make it easy for them. And then I guess the second thing would be integration. We are seeing more and more of that. And I don't think buying siloed systems for SOX and ERM and compliance and IT risk, I don't think that makes sense. They maybe have more bells and whistles, but you'll gain more by, asking the assessment once instead of asking people for the same thing in different systems or trying to stitch them together. So those are the two pieces of advice I would have. Focus on that frontline user, and focus on integration and sharing data before worrying about, every little bell and whistle.
Okay, fantastic. That were all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot something, you would like to add something?
No, I don't. I think those were all the right things. I mean, again, we love working with people. So, feel free to call us. We write a lot, we do a lot. If people got questions, we're not the hard sell organization. So we're fundamentally interested in the space and love talking to people. So, feel free. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. You'll see, I'm posting a lot of stuff. So reach out to me there. Always happy to talk to people and have the debate.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Will, for your time, and I wish your company big growth in the coming period. And I would like to hear from you in a few months. What, how are you doing?
Absolutely. We look forward to it.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
1 second.